Hello, this is the Mae B Mindful Podcast, and I am your host, Hannah Mae. I'm a mother of 6, conscious birth instructor and educator, spiritual growth facilitator, and certified hypnotist. This podcast is about inspiring hope, expanding awareness and consciousness in order to revolutionize the way we live and experience our lives. You can expect thought-provoking episodes each week spanning a range of topics, drawing from both my own journey of transformation and healing and working with others. I hope you find this podcast to be informative, refreshing, illuminating, and instrumental in your own soul's evolution and growth. Let's jump right in. Hi there, folks. Welcome back to the Mae B Mindful Podcast. I was actually in the shower and I was having these thoughts come through around this topic. And I was I just got to sit down and record. So I'm not totally put together here. If you want to see what I look like after a shower, go subscribe to my YouTube channel. It's not that exciting. I'm fully clothed. I just don't have makeup on and my hair's not brushed. And actually, I'm going to correct myself. I put mascara on. I have this funny memory that just came back that when I went to a soul cycle class once, when I had a very minor soul cycle phase until I decided it was just too energetically abrasive for me and I'd rather go sit on a mountaintop and meditate somewhere. But I went to this soul cycle class and there was this woman, she was a little older than me and she was very sort of put together. And when I walked in, I remember I didn't have any makeup on because why would you wear makeup to a soul cycle class? And I walked in and she looked at me and she turned around, she looked at me, she kind of gave me a once over and she said, "Oh, honey, you look 12. And she turned around and went back to the person she was talking to. And I was like, oh. And I was so conflicted because, I guess that's a compliment. Maybe she's jealous. Maybe she wants to look 12 and she doesn't. Or then again, it didn't feel like a compliment the way she said it and sort of brushed me off. So it kind of stuck in my mind ever since then. But without mascara on, my eyelashes kind of disappear. I also have, just as a side note, we have not jumped into the topic. I just want you to know this is not a beauty conversation, although this is where it seems to be going right now. I have tattooed eyeliner and eyebrows. And that is so actually that I can just do life without makeup and feel pretty put together at any given moment, aside from the hyperpigmentation that I might need to cover up from all the hormone shifts and pregnancies and sun exposure I have on a regular basis. Anyways, that's all pretty boring stuff, although we could talk about ourselves endlessly, right? Never really seems to get old, maybe only for the listener. So I'll switch gears here. And what I wanted to discuss was the idea of unsolicited advice as it relates to being helpful and wanting to be helpful. And a lot of us have and feel we have something to share based on our own experience. And we get excited to share that, especially if we're growing and we've come on the other side of something. A lot of times we can get really excited to share that. I know I do, because we have something to offer. And if we see someone struggling in something, we can want to connect with that person and either offer advice or support. And that's a beautiful thing. However, as you know, if you've ever experienced, it cannot necessarily be always received so well, because here's the thing. If people aren't asking for advice, they generally don't want it. If people want advice, they'll generally ask for it, okay? Not to mention, even if people act like they want advice, you've probably had this experience too, especially if you're the kind of person that people go to with their problems, so that you'll give them feedback, so that you'll hold space for all their problems to just funnel into, and then you can hold a space for it, hear it, give them advice, and then what do? They turn around and they go do exactly what they were doing before that landed them in the problem, and they don't take your advice. And that's frustrating because you're like, why did I just give you all that advice? So, advice I find to be pretty ineffective unless somebody very specifically says, hey, what do you do if you want this result? If somebody asks you that specifically, I would say it's a safe bet that they probably do want advice. Otherwise, most likely, you're wasting your breath and energy. And there is another way to do it that I have found effective and helpful. And it's part of why I share the way that I do, aside from the fact that I really grew up in 12-step rooms where you generally keep the focus on yourself and you share your own experience, right? It's not about me projecting a solution or a problem, my problem, onto anybody else, even though we all might have the same flipping problem in the room. It's really not my job to make that assumption or try and tell somebody how to live. I can only share my own experience. And here's the thing. My experience is actually the only thing I have. And that's what we're wanting, is a new experience, is the only thing that actually has that much value. Nobody actually wants advice. Nobody wants to be told what to do. That's for sure. I don't think. So the most impactful thing I have to offer is my experience, which is why I often share using I statements. Aside from the fact that in any kind of conversation, it's the least inflammatory way to communicate versus you pointing the finger. You're not lecturing, you're not talking down to anybody, you're not on any kind of hilltop, moral high ground, or soapbox. And that's part of why I created this space for me to have this podcast, is for me to be able to share freely, because it's a container. I mean, if I walked around talking like this all day long, people might get pretty sick of me. And here you have the option to opt in or not. But I do share my own experience because it is part of what I have to offer. And my experience has come through my own trials, tribulations, trial and error, spiritual growth. And that is my greatest gift, I believe. My deepest suffering and pain that I have come through is, in fact, my greatest gift that I have to offer anybody. And so my experience is, in fact, a living, breathing testimony. It is very much alive, and it carries with it an energy that people can see and feel. And that goes for anybody's experience, as long as it is honest and authentic. And so I do share pretty honestly. I mean, I don't go into descriptive, vivid, deep detail because that might not be smart. And I share pretty honestly when I am directed and inspired to, on an individual, on a one-on-one basis with people as well, because that is the thing that is going to be the most connective for people. Because if they can make those connections within themselves, then they can start to have an experience also. And so I generally don't try and talk to somebody and help somebody with something that I have zero experience with. That could be coming from a pretty egocentric or pompous, arrogant place. I can't speak from authority or in an educated way. And when I say authority, I mean in truth, because truth always carries the power and the authority. Authenticity is going to be the thing that connects, okay, and carries and reaches the furthest and can resonate with those unconnected, disconnected dots within somebody else. If it rings alarm bells in somebody else, then it's only because I'm speaking to the heart of the issue for somebody. And so my message isn't going to be for everybody. I mean, some people can listen to me in my vulnerability, which I am pretty practiced in showing up in, because that vulnerability was necessary to save my own life. That, like, some people are going to listen to me and be like, that girl is whack. Like, she is a little crazy and extreme. But somebody else who understands those swings and that more extreme way of thinking is going to feel safe with me, you know? And so those people that show up in that way, those people stand out to me. And the people that I can see that have come on the other side of something, that is a recovered and well person. They might not be well and recovered in all areas of their life, because that's a hard thing to be, because we're all still growing. But if I see that they have the key to a door that I want to get into and unlock for myself, I'm going to go to that person. And if I can see that that person is showing up vulnerably and honestly, then that gives me permission to be that vulnerable and honest too. And I had a long road. I had some trial and error with this, and learning who I could safely speak to about the things that were coming up for me. And there were a lot of people that I thought were my friends, And but it was a little more surface. And a lot of people have a lot of judgment. And so, the last thing we want to be is judged if we show up honestly, right? That can be enough to deter us and send us back into disconnected isolation. And that isn't healthy for anybody. And the truth is, there are always going to be people that don't understand. There are always going to be people that are going to be triggered by a message of truth. There are always going to be people that are going to judge you based on their own blind spots and prejudice. I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager and a young adult, I was dying inside. There were a few times where I reached out, and I thought because these people were older and I respected them, that I could share honestly what was going on with me. And I could say something like, wow, I'm really having a hard time. I'm really struggling. And I was met with some pretty dismissive judgment because multiple different occasions, because these people who I was attracted to, okay, were prejudicing based on some external conditions, based on the fact that they viewed me as being born into privilege. And they thought that because of that, I should be successful in all areas of my life. Now, those people were unconscious and unaware, and they didn't understand that those things on the outside has nothing to do with our spiritual condition. And those things don't equate to happiness and peace inside. And so I came to see that they were not my people. Those were not the people that could hold space for me. Maybe family members, we tend to think like, oh, our mother and our father, right? And some people can talk very honestly and openly to their mother or father, but sometimes the space cannot be held. And that other person's stuff, whether it's a family member or not, their stuff can get in the way and be triggered. It can be very unproductive and unhelpful. So when I speak on these episodes, one of the reasons why I'm not saying you this, you that, you should, is because I don't know what's best for you. Yeah, and nobody actually knows what's best for anybody. We can have a lot of judgment on what we think somebody should do and the best way they should do it, but quite oftentimes the fact of the matter is they are on the path that they are on. We don't know where someone is on their path and what is necessary for their own spiritual growth. So the more we love somebody, the more attached we can get to an ideal of how they should be living their life and what would be best for them, because we do want what's best for them. But the thing that we don't understand sometimes is what might need to happen in order for them to get to the place where they are ready to make that change for themselves and integrate information into their own experience. There's no lecture or no advice that's going to change anybody, because they're only going to accept that when they're actually genuinely seeking it anyways. And I'm sure you've had the experience where maybe you've said something to someone a million times, and then they might come to you one day and be like, hey, guess what? My therapist or my so-and-so just said, oh, blah, blah, blah. And they repeat the very thing that you've been saying to them for 10 years. And then you're like, oh, okay, wow, what a great idea. Awesome. Okay, good for you. But, like the thing that you had said just wasn't ready to be accepted yet. And maybe the thing that you'd been saying was a seed that had been planted. But to be on the end of it, of the advice giver, can be very frustrating when that seed isn't germinating and growing and flourishing. But that's all based in judgment on what we think is best for that person anyways. And the truth is we don't know. And all you have to do is look at your own experience and see your own journey and how nobody else gets to choose the timeline of these things. You kind of don't even get to choose the timeline of these things, except for in the way that we can choose to soften, be more open, receptive, and seek more awareness around. And anytime we are seeking honestly, we will start to get some pretty immediate feedback from the universe, from God. There is an energetic response here. There is immediate reciprocation. And a lot of times we don't want to see what we think we want to see. We might have a different vision of what we think we're going to get. And a lot of these new awarenesses that we become open to can actually be very painful, because we have to see that we've been operating from a place of disillusionment. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a really powerful thing to do, but we really don't become open and receptive to that until we're ready to do that. And on a subconscious level, we know that. And that's oftentimes, I think, why we stay rigid or closed and keep our world smaller, our internal world, our spiritual world smaller than it needs to be. I think, as long as we can show up for ourselves honestly and vulnerably and seek the truth, then it will unfold and we'll become receptive to it in the doses that we're ready to receive and accept and integrate. The best way that we can be supportive and help somebody is to really live that degree of wellness and address those things within ourselves that we are wanting to see in others, because our walk is going to be a little bit more instrumental than our talk, because talk is cheap, and there's a lot of people out there that are just full of shit. I mean, there are. I had to turn the audio off on Instagram because there's so many people giving advice. And a lot of it just doesn't resonate for me because it feels really disingenuous. And I just don't believe them. But every now and again, you come across that person who speaks with true heart and is really anchored in authenticity. And that just reverberates and has profound impact, So the best thing that we can do in order to support ourselves, grow ourselves, and then be supportive and impacting the people around us that we love is to be operating from that place of honesty and vulnerability. And I'll just say one more thing before I have to go and pick up my son. He just called me like 17 times. Is that when I have shown up and shared vulnerably, even though my ego had to take a little bit of a blow, because I wasn't going to look as healthy or recovered or well or perfect as I might want to, I have received more feedback from that in showing up honestly and vulnerably than the other, because people can really connect with that. When you do that, you become a contact person. You become a connect point, like a contact person on their path. And people are so grateful. People are so grateful to see the struggle that you are moving through. And when you can show up for yourself and do that, and connecting in that way is really important. To be seen in that is really important, as long as it's with people that you can trust and are safe. That strengthens connection for you. And people say thank you. People say thank you. When I have shown up and shared vulnerably in my rawness and in my truth, people always say thank you. So to be able to know and feel that I'm giving back and I am a part of, and I am instrumental and I'm being used somehow in the greater good and picture, and that I'm impacting somebody, is incredibly uplifting and strengthening for me in that, in my own pain, in my own process, in my vulnerability. And what it does is it transforms pain into gratitude and joy. And that is an incredible thing. And that is always accessible. It is always accessible to stop fighting, to surrender, to be truthful, to drop into the pain of the vulnerability, right? But then in that, we are elevated. And in that, getting present with, we can start to get present for joy. We are accepting those things in us, getting present with them. And to really get present, I believe, is always to experience joy. But we do have to get first present to the thing that's uncomfortable in order for that to be transformed, transmuted. And so with this, I'm going to end. And I love you guys, and I look forward to your feedback. Thank you for tuning in to the Mae B Mindful Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and improve. For more information, resources, and exclusive content, visit our website at maybemindful.com, or go ahead and follow us over on Instagram at Mae B Mindful. If you enjoyed this week's episode, please give me a follow, screenshot the episode, and go ahead and tag me until next week when I bring you another thought-provoking and inspiring topic. Until then,